Words on Skin. Part I. Lizzie watched as her best friend Jessica brushed past her brother again on her way through their kitchen. The house was packed full of people and there was plenty to eat and drink in every room, but Jess still managed to find a reason to swing through the kitchen every 15 minutes to flirt with her brother. "Hey, a stud," Jessica smiled, "it really is nice to see you back around these parts again. I kinda missed you." She winked, nodded at Lizzie and wandered off again with a few gratuitous wiggles of her curvy hips. Lizzie's brother leaned into her with the question she saw coming, "Okay, what's with Jess? Does she like me now or something?" Lizzie smirked and waited until Jessica turned a corner out of earshot. "Let's just say she likes the kinds of things she could do with you." "And what kinds of things might they be?" "You're the dumbest smart guy I know, but even you're not that dumb. Either take that frisky cheerleader friend of mine upstairs and find out for yourself, or stay down here and hang out with your adorable kid sister." "Sounds like a close one. Want me to get a coin for you to flip, Scooter?" "Don't bother, dog girl, I'm going with plan A." Lizzie watched her brother toddle after Jessica. As consolation, she took a long swig of her beer, swallowed, and howled softly to herself, "Bah woo." Her brother Richard was a year older and actually was the dumbest smart guy she knew. Sometimes she swore he couldn't see the nose in front of his face. He was pure book smarts from head to toe. He'd steamrolled through high school, racking up the highest GPA in the school's history, then nailed a perfect SAT. He'd even be finishing up his undergraduate ahead of schedule. Less than 3 years for a physics degree at one of the best programs in the country? Who the hell could compete with that? Lizzie sighed. She was proud of her big brother, but sometimes he made her feel small. All she could do was run. Be a frickin' woo. The dog girl and bah woo thing? That started when her middle school track coach came to visit their house after school 8 years ago. Lizzie and her brother snuck to the top of the stairs to listen to the grown UPS talking down in the kitchen. "You have a lovely home, Miss Robbins, and I appreciate your agreeing to see me. I know you're a busy woman, so I won't take up too much of your time. I'm happy to tell you that you have a very gifted child. I'm quite proud of Richard, but I thought, I'm not here to talk about your son. I'm here to talk about Elizabeth. I'm her track coach. I thought you should know that Liz is an excellent runner. In fact, she may just be the best I've ever seen." "Really? I mean, I guess she has always been quick on her little feet. If I look away for a second, she's gone." Lizzie remembered beaming proudly at Richard upstairs. She took this as a big compliment. "It's more than just that, Miss Robbins. Look, middle school kids? Even the fast ones? They're a mess when they run, all of them pushing and shoving to get up front, to lead right from the beginning. It's complete chaos. None of them have the maturity or the patience to pace themselves, to hang back and wait for the right time to make their move. Hell, most of them won't even figure that out in high school. But not Lizzie. She's very special." "How so?" "You need to come to our track meets to support her and see what I mean at the same time. Lizzie doesn't run. She chases." The coach's voice grew more excited. "She does it every race. It's a beautiful thing to watch." Less than halfway through, Lizzie falls in a few yards behind the lead girl. She tracks her. She drives her. Heck, she even baits her. Then at the very end, Lizzie simply runs her down. Honestly, I don't think I'd even call what Liz does cross-country. She's not just running. She's hunting. Like a little dingo. Upstairs, Richard hugged her with one arm and teased her softly, "Sweet, Mom's going to buy you a flea collar, sis." "Bah woo," Lizzie howled quietly into his shoulder and giggled. It was her very first bah woo. Of course, the coach's offhand nickname stuck with Lizzie, and Lil Dingo would eventually be stitched across the back of her track uniforms. As the years went by, Lizzie ran and her body changed. By high school, the quick little blonde pixie became a sleek and slender young woman. Lizzie looked like a gazelle, but she still ran like a predator. Chasing, hunting, winning. In fact, she would win state finals in cross country each of her 4 years in high school, a feat unheard of before Lizzie. People even came to track meets to watch her. And who could blame them? She was hotter than hell in her school's skimpy little track uniforms, long, sleekly muscled legs and bobbing little breasts. Her finishes were always spectacular too. After loping along patiently at the number 2 spot for 3 miles, she'd get this crazy little grin. Then her legs would stretch, they'd quicken, and Lizzie would start her race. Without fail, she'd chase that poor last girl down like something small and tasty. 2 months ago, when Lizzie broke through the yellow tape at her last high school race, she didn't have to howl for herself. Her coaches, her family, and classmates were doing it for her, for their favorite little dingo, Ba-woo. Ba-woo. Lizzie snapped out of her reminiscing when Richard reappeared with Jessica. The curvy, raven-haired cheerleader winked at Lizzie as she led her brother upstairs. One of Jessica's hands was already playing at the bottom of her tight tank top, obviously itching to get it off. Jessica liked to show off her body and Lizzie didn't blame her. Speaking objectively, Jessica's breasts were spectacular and she had every right to be proud of them. Of course, half the guys in their high school class could draw them from memory. Perhaps Jess was a little too proud of her boobs. Lizzie took the next couple of minutes to finish her beer, then she set it down. She chewed her lip again, pondering, then decided to follow them. She was more than a little curious and she knew her brother well. Odds were that he'd be too distracted by Jessica's charms to shut his sticky bedroom door completely. She crept up towards his bedroom and she was right. There was a quite peekable gap left. She set herself tipsily down on the floor for a little bit of perving. Okay, a lot of perving. From the look of things, Richard was having one of the best nights of his life. Jessica had always been that perfect cheerleadery mix of flexibility and eagerness that drove guys crazy. At that moment, Jessica was topless and cupping her oversized, flawless breasts in her hands with her lips wrapped around half of Richard's cock. Lizzie gaped. Her brother's erection was impressive, and while Jess was working her mouth down on it steadily, she was definitely struggling. Her full lips strained to fit around his shaft. When she finally swallowed his entire length, she groaned from her chest and bobbed slightly. Lizzie had to admit, Jess knew how to please a guy. The curvy brunette never forgot to look up and keep eye contact with her brother even as her hands slid down from her own tits and under her skirt to quickly drag a small white thong down and off. Yep, Jess knew what she was doing. Lizzie watched as her gal pal ditched her skirt, then scooted onto the bed on her back and spread her legs. Lizzie and her brother's eyes were both drawn to the same place. Jessica was shaved completely bare. Her tiny glistening sex was a perfectly smooth and pink invitation. Scooter paused only long enough to finish getting his pants off and quickly slid on top of her. Lizzie watched her friend's mouth fall open as Richard eased himself into her. Jess shifted and pulled her legs up very high, limberly hooking them over Richard's shoulders. Yep, flexible and eager. Damn cheerleaders. For the next half hour, Lizzie watched her brother make love to her best friend. She was appalled and excited at the same time. Jessica shivered through 3 separate and very satisfying-looking orgasms before Richard groaned his own release. Lizzie assumed they were done. But they weren't done. Jessica slipped herself off the bed and did something Lizzie didn't expect, not from her 18-year-old friend. Jess stood, turned, and bent herself forward at the waist with her upper body on the bed. She swished her little cheerleadery bubble butt temptingly. "See mere Scooter, I've got this other hole you missed." Out in the hallway, Lizzie's eyes slowly widened. Partly because Jessica had just used Lizzie's nickname for her brother. And partly because Jessica offered what she did, Lizzie had no idea her friend did, well, that. Mostly though, Lizzie was astonished because her big brother, her sweet and gentle Scooter who used to read her bedtime stories when they were little, didn't hesitate. He simply stood and moved behind Jessica and then gave her just what she asked for, pressing himself into her ass with no more than a nod. Jessica whimpered at the invasion but didn't move away. Worst of all, the bastard was good at it, judging from the very happy groans Jessica made over the next 10 minutes. It was wrong and dirty and nasty and hot. Peering through the crack into her brother's bedroom at the gleeful sodomy scene, Lizzie's surprised face slowly spread into the same determined expression she wore at the last 100 yards of every race she'd ever run. Lizzie would chase. And she'd win. She always did. Bah-woo. She wandered back downstairs quietly for another beer. 1 year later. 20 years and 2 days old, Richard woke to the sounds of seagulls crying and surf lapping at the beach. But it wasn't either of those things that drew him out of his sleep. It was a slender little finger that did it. That finger was tracing letters across his back. It wasn't all that odd. His kid sister Lizzie liked to wake him up this way, writing words on his skin. They'd written messages like this for each other since they were children. It was their mother's idea. When they were young, their family went on long car rides to visit their grandparents. Little Richard and Elizabeth would get noisy in the back seat along the way. 2 hours of non-stop tickling, poking, fighting, laughing, and crying. Normal kid stuff, really. Unfortunately, their father was a bit high-strung and those long drives to see his in-laws only made him more tense. Their mom did what good moms do. She buffered. She taught her children skin writing to keep them occupied. "Give her your hand, Richie," his mother nodded at his sister from the front seat. "And close your eyes. Okay, now you think of a word, Liz. A small one. But don't say it out loud, honey. Ready? Now spell it on your brother's palm." Liz nodded and traced each letter of her word with her tiny 7-year-old finger. She had to write it twice before he could get it. "Cat." Richard finally guessed. Liz giggled and their mother smiled. "Very good, you two. Lizzie, keep going until Richard guesses wrong. Let's see how many words you can get him to say." Over the next 2 hours, their parents listened to the more peaceful sounds of elementary school vocabulary coming up from their back seat. Dog. House. Truck. Chicken, but you forgot the other C. Their mother's strange little improvised game was one of the many things that built a strong bond between Richard and Lizzie over the years. They had their tiffs and their struggles, but they stuck by each other more than other siblings they knew. That bond grew even tighter when their family shrank a few years later. Their father died of a heart attack. No one was surprised, he'd always been wound pretty tight. Their mom missed him, but she was leading an active, happy life again. Richard focused on his sister's finger as it traced the 3 quick letters of her ritual puzzle before moving on to what she was going to make for breakfast. The puzzle? He'd never solved it. Feeling what was for breakfast? That was easy. "Pancakes," he muttered into the mattress. "Good boy. And the other thing?" She scratched the thick brown hair at the back of his head. "I still have no fucking idea what the hell IMU means." "Ooh, poor little Scooter. Don't worry, you'll get it someday. You're the smartest dumb guy I know." She patted his back and left him alone to get dressed. Stupid IMU puzzle. 8 years ago, he'd told her that she'd misspelled emu and described the little ostrich-like bird. She'd laughed and shook her head. 7 years ago, he'd guessed that she'd cheated and skipped the apostrophe for IMU. Some sort of funny poetry thing. This of course made no sense. She'd laughed harder. Lizzie's hardest laugh came 3 years ago when Richard, fresh from his first few weeks of high school physics, had figured out that I was the letter for electrical current and the Greek letter mu was the symbol commonly used for a coefficient of friction. Thus, IMU meant current friction, referring to how her finger was rubbing across his skin. Lizzie had nearly wet herself laughing. "Dumbass, I wrote that for you when I was 10 years old. I barely understood what you just said now. How the hell could I have meant that then?" She had a point. Richard sighed into his pillow. He knew he was smarter than average and that he was pretty good at figuring things out. The fact that his little sister had stumped him for so long was a sore point. Well, Lizzie was right about one thing: pancakes sounded perfect for their first day at the beach. By the time he splashed some water on his face and pulled on a bathing suit, then made it to the kitchen, Lizzie had already finished cooking and was pouring coffee. Amend that, pouring coffee in a bikini. Good God, his heart skipped several beats. Lizzie's back was turned to him and the little black bikini's strings were knotted loosely at the middle of her back, her neck, and each hip. Richard had long since made peace with the fact that his kid sister was far and away the prettiest girl he knew. Blonde with gigantic, soft, Bambi brown eyes, she was a gifted long-distance runner and it showed. Basically, everyone agreed she looked like a gazelle. Her long, slender legs swept up into an equally sleek little ass. Her slim, tight upper body matched her lower half. Lizzie Robbins was built for speed and bikinis. She looked amazing in that suit. He snapped out of his daze when she turned, golden ponytail swinging, and handed him a cup of coffee. "How late did you get here last night?" she asked as she slid into her seat at the table. The motion made her round breasts sway slightly in her top and he only looked away with effort. "Oh, a little after 2. It took me that long to sober up from the birthday party they threw me at school. I'm going to need a lot of coffee today." "Thanks." As proof, he took a long drag from his cup. His eyes flicked down her body again before he could stop them. This time she caught him looking. "Like my new suit?" She needled him a bit, eyebrow cocked coyly. "It's not bad," he shrugged. "It's just funny seeing you wearing it in the kitchen. My shy kid sister used to wear t-shirts over her suit right up until we got to the beach. That had more to do with mom being around than being shy, dummy," she half smiled. "No mom around to harass me now." They ate breakfast and stepped out the back door and onto a patio overlooking a beach that they had all to themselves. Lizzie said her fiancé's parents rented the beach house for them for the last month of the summer, but he'd gotten dragged away to help with his dad's company. Lizzie, and her fiancé. Wow, it even sounded weird. His little Lizzie, just 1 year into college, was getting married? And she'd never even brought the guy home to meet her family. She'd always been independent and headstrong, but this was ridiculous. He only found out when she called him late one night from school with her engagement news that spring. He'd answered the phone and, before he'd even said hello, she just blurted it out. "I'm getting married." "Wha? Hey." His sister giggled over the phone. "Married, Scooter. I'm getting married." "Who? When? Why?" A bad answer to that last question popped into his head. "Oh God, you're pregnant, aren't you?" "Relax, silly, I'm not prego. His name is, okay, don't make fun, his name is Chip." "Chip?" He laughed, he couldn't help it. "This is some kind of sick joke. You're really going to talk smack about names, Scooter?" "For real, his name is Chip. And he's a great guy. We're going to get married this summer. At the beach." "Lizzie, I told you pot or tequila. Never both. You really can't mix them and keep a grip on reality." "Come on, Scooter, I'm sober." "Well, mostly sober. But more importantly, I am serious. I really am getting married. He just gave me a ring tonight and everything. Wait until you see it. It's fucking huge." It finally sank in, she wasn't kidding. "Wow. Okay. So what did mom say?" "I haven't told her yet. You called me before mom." "Of course, silly, you're my brother. And brothers come first. Brothers come first." That one tugged at his heartstrings because there was some history to it. Richard had given little Lizzie her first kiss. It had been her idea and it was very innocent. She'd said she was worried about making a fool of herself with her first boyfriend. "Come on, Scooter, please." She'd pleaded with him. I brushed my teeth and used some of Mom's mouthwash and everything. No cooties, I swear. But then she'd looked at him seriously and said something that had never even occurred to him back then. Just don't do anything gross like put your tongue in my mouth, okay? He did like she asked. He kissed her. Their young lips merged hesitantly in a tender way for a long moment. Actually, it was kinda nice. Lizzie had smiled hugely afterwards. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? Now you'll always be the first boy to kiss me. Cool, hey. She darted in and pecked his cheek in a more sisterly way. Thanks, Scooter. You know, I think brothers should always come first. But that would change soon. She'd be someone's wife. It was all happening too fast. Richard pushed these thoughts away and focused on the now as he and his sister crossed the beach, then swam out about 40 yards into the surf where the waves just began to curl. They were both comfortable in the water and Lizzie was practically fearless when it came to picking her waves. The bigger the better. They picked out their respective spots, alternatingly bobbing, waiting and surfing. Later, when Lizzie came back from her last wave, she swam over to him and wrapped her arms around his neck. Mind if I hang on you, bro? Can't touch bottom here like you, she pouted, not tall enough. And I see you're catching the nicer rides from here. It was true. The largest waves were just beginning to curl where he could barely stand. Just a few yards further in, Lizzie had to duck under them because it was too late. He stiffened when she wrapped her long legs around his waist too, and the warmth of her groin pressed into his belly. He felt an instant stirring in his suit. Lazy, he smirked. She could tread water like a champ. He'd seen her do it. Okay, maybe that too, she smiled, then brightened even more. Hey, feel like launching me? It was an old request. He used to help her catch waves by pushing her forward for a head start when they were younger. Fine, but I get to pick the waves. Yeah, gimme the big ones. I like big ones. She giggled as she moved into position, stretched out on her stomach with her arms reaching forward. He hesitated when he moved to put his hands where they went years ago. His left hand supported her belly. Jesus, it was so smooth and so tight as his palm pressed into it slightly. He felt the firm muscles of her abdomen shift. His right hand gripped the front of her left leg just above her knee, and he felt the smooth long muscles of her quadriceps too. Damn it, this was easier back before his sister went and turned into a hottie. "'Kay, ready for launch?" she chirped. They waited a few minutes for a good wave. Richard kept his sister afloat with small adjustments, shifting his hands on her nearly naked body. She giggled when he moved his hand at her stomach too quickly. "Sorry sis," he apologized, "I'm not actually trying to tickle you." "Es okay, it felt kind of good actually. You've got nice hands there, stud." Before he could ponder that statement, an enormous wave came and she giggled and shrieked for him to launch her. He did, and he watched her surf away. She came back, still giggling, and rubbing a small scrape under her chin. "Dude, I got run through the washing machine on that one. You all right?" "Hell, yeah. Let's do it again." They did. For another hour Richard heaved his gorgeous kid sister with the surf until the sun was high and hot enough to drive them inside. They slipped back into the house for lunch. After a quick bite, Richard made a pitcher of daiquiris and they drank themselves silly in the shade of the porch. Silly enough for her to spill her guts about Chip. She steered their conversation towards sex, and then she started talking more freely and more explicitly than he'd ever heard her. College had loosened his kid sister up a lot. He almost couldn't believe what was coming out of her mouth. "Chip and I went to his apartment after a movie. We'd been dating for a couple of months and it kind of felt like it was time for stuff." She looked at her brother. Richard nodded neutrally and she continued. "He led me right back to his bedroom and laid me down on his bed. Chip started by eating me for almost an hour." She sipped from her drink as that raunchy morsel sunk into his brain. "After I'd come 3 times and I was a soaking wet puddle of joy, he rolled me over onto my belly. Then he nudged my legs open and I felt his gigantic thing sliding up along my thigh. He pushed forward slowly. So slowly. I felt myself pucker inwards. He was almost as wide as the entire gap between my legs. It was ridiculous, like getting poked with a warm baseball bat. He pushed. I wiggled. He pushed more. And I wiggled more. It didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. We kept trying though, each of us getting more and more excited. Then all of a sudden, his gigantic head popped inside me. Richard watched Liz shiver, no doubt reliving the moment. I remember gasping and clawing at the bed beneath me. I tensed up. Wrong thing to do. It made things worse. It felt like someone was trying to work their whole fist inside me. He felt me straining and he waited patiently. He rubbed my back. He told me I was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. That my body was amazing. That when I relaxed, it would start to feel good. He was totally right, of course. Lizzie paused and had another sip of liquid courage. Before she'd started her story, she'd told Richard that she needed him to understand what she was up against. He was curious about where this was all headed. We waited like that for a while, Scooter. Neither of us moved except for him gently rubbing my back up and down. When I told him I was ready to try more, he started pushing again. It was insane. Like childbirth in reverse. I had my first orgasm while he was still working himself in me. I came again when he bottomed out. Oh Scooter, his sister finally looked over at him again and shook her head with a mix of pride and embarrassment. The motion swung her damp blonde ponytail gently. I saw God that night. By the time he finished with me, I was drooling into the pillow and babbling like a fool. That is what it was like the first time I slept with Chip. Why the hell wouldn't I marry him? Richard just stared at his kid sister. Wow. Yep, she nodded and downed the rest of her drink. Wow. You said that already, dummy. She slapped his arm and giggled. For the first time in a long while, he noticed how much brighter her eyes were when she laughed. I know, but just one more time. Wow. So he's the guy, huh? Yep. He treats you good. Like a dream, she giggled again to herself oddly. Feeling the daiquiris a bit too much himself, Richard let his eyes skim down her slim body yet again. It was a miracle her suit had stayed on in the surf. The top had loosened a bit though and he could see the edge of one of her light pink nipples peeking out. He exhaled slowly and tried not to stare. He knew what they looked like. He'd been the first boy to see her breasts too. Like their first kiss, that had also been her idea. She'd just wandered into his bedroom unannounced one afternoon and hauled up her tank top without so much as a warning. She wasn't wearing a bra. She looked from his astonished face then down to her bare breasts and back again. She even swung her torso a little and they swayed slightly from left to right. Well, Scooter? They're like normal and everything, right? You know how mom is, she'd lie to my face if she thought it would help my self-esteem. All Richard could do at the time was stare. His sister's teenage tits were perfectly round handfuls with little pink nipples that pointed up slightly towards the ceiling. Holy crap, sis. There. Oh God, I knew it, they're deformed aren't they? Does the left one look bigger to you too? His brain finally got some traction. No. God no. They're beautiful. They're round and perky and perfect. Really? Really? Now please put those things away before I do something stupid. Like what? She'd looked at him funny. Like shove my face in them, he joked. Seriously? She'd laughed and taken a step towards him. Yes. No. He had to hold up his hand to stop her. Jesus, pull your shirt back down and get out of here. I can't think clearly with you standing there half naked. She'd pouted. How come you want me to go all of a sudden? Then her expression turned sly. Are you going to play with yourself? That's none of your business. Wrong, oh Scooter, you are most definitely my business. She'd let her shirt fall back down and skipped across the room towards him. She smiled sweetly, then leaned in to nudge his nose with hers. I'm your sister, dummy. Yet, he pushed her away gently. Now give me a few minutes of privacy, would you? I need to sort myself out after seeing my kid sister's boobs. Yeah, sort yourself out, hey. She snickered. Okay, but don't overdo it and damage yourself permanently, okay? Someday you may actually find a girl who's willing to touch that thing for you. She kept snickering as she pulled his door shut behind her. As Richard recalled, 20 seconds later was guiltily and frantically masturbating to the image of his younger sister's gorgeous tits. Less than a minute later, he was wearing about a pint of his own semen. The current Lizzie rolled over onto her stomach and it drew him back to the present. There it was, that delicious little tush. Like two oranges pressed together under her black bikini bottom. Her breasts? They'd slipped in and out of his fantasies a few times. Her perfect miniature tush? A different thing entirely, it was the leading role in his dreams. He compared every woman's ass to his sister's. He'd found no equal. He doubted he ever would. Lizzie's bent her legs up in the air and swayed them haphazardly. He tried to ignore the way the muscles of her legs and ass flexed and shifted. So what about you, Scooter? Hooking up with any co-eds eager to impress their teaching assistant? Not so much. Ah, none of 'em like the backdoor delivery, hey. Boy, she was back to this again. She'd been teasing him off and on about this for the past year after he'd slept with her friend Jessica last summer. Jessica evidently didn't keep secrets. His sister knew everything that happened. Everything. Including Jessica's spectacular anal finale. 4 months afterwards, Lizzie's emails to him at school started with things like "Dear Ass Master" or "Hey I Rump Ranger" or "S up Booty Banger." Yet, funny. In the beginning, anyway. And now she was circling back to rib him about it again. Is where I'm delivering really any of your business, sis? He raised an eyebrow. Her slender bikini-wrapped body twisted limberly to curl up on her side. She looked up at him with a smile. Wrong, oh Scooter, you will always be my business. I'm your sister, remember? He shook his head but had to smile too. He'd walked right into that one. He watched as Lizzie rolled back onto her stomach again. Richard lasted a full 15 seconds before his eyes naturally slid downwards to her butt for another look. Scratch my back a little, Scooter? I'm all itchy from the drying salt water. It was an invitation he couldn't turn down. The skin of her back was soft and smooth and already lightly tanned. He stroked her for a few minutes until Liz looked up at him with glazed eyes. She nibbled her lip thoughtfully then and twitched her nose. Scooter, how drunk are you? I'm feeling zero pain. Why? 'Cause I need to ask you for something. I figured there'd be a catch to all of this. I didn't really think I'd be getting 2 weeks at the beach for free. What do you need? Help, she sighed. With something. Something weird. Spit it out, sis. Since when have you ever been afraid to ask me for stuff? Okay. Oh geez. Scooter? I need help with I need to figure out. She trailed off at the end, looking away. Help with your what? Arg, gimme your other hand. Ooh, this was going to be good. Lizzie preferred to skin write things she didn't want to say out loud. She traced 4 letters into his palm. All. He deadpanned. That was an N, not an M, you jerk. Richard started laughing. He couldn't help it. Quit it, she huffed. C'mon, I'm being serious. Chip asked if, that on our honeymoon, well, I'd like to try letting him, you know. She gave up when she saw by her brother's enormous grin that he understood. It's just that he's so fricking. She shook her head. Big. He finished for her, chuckling. Exactly. Richard scratched his head. Well, it's not really all that complicated, sis. Just get some toys and some lube. Then go lock yourself in a bedroom and put on some soft music. I've tried. I can't. Look, I've never told anyone this, but I had a really bad experience with that already. A stupid frat guy my first semester. We were both smashed. I don't know whether he went for my butt on purpose or he was so drunk that he missed the right hole. Either way, he crammed it halfway in me, bone dry, before I could get him off me. It was horrible and the whole thing has seriously freaked me out ever since. Oh, sorry kiddo. So what is it you want me to do? How should I know? Unlike some people, I don't have a lot of experience with this stuff. I just know my goal: let Chipper poke me in my booty on our honeymoon without sending me to the damn emergency room. Well, I'm not sure how. I guess that I was thinking that you could make it seem, I dunno, not so damn scary somehow. She may have been wrestling with her words, but her hands were clear. She reached around and took his hand that was stroking her back and slid it slowly down. Further and further. Past the gorgeous twin dimples on either side of her spine. Down over the top edge of her tiny black suit bottom. And directly onto the firm swell of one of her little round ass cheeks. He gently palmed it automatically. It was so small it didn't even remotely fill his hand. Richard could feel his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Sis. I'm not ugly, am I, Scooter? No honey, you're definitely not ugly. Just touch me there a little. It'll help. In my head, I know that you're a guy, but somehow it doesn't feel as scary when it's you touching me. I think it's 'cause I know you would never hurt me. She looked up at him again and half smiled tipsily. I honestly think you're the only one who can help me get over this stupid butt phobia. Her total trust was like a drug. It mixed with the daiquiris and the intoxicating smoothness of her perfect miniature rump. The combination was powerful. Even more powerful? The adorable little sigh his kid sister let out when he started stroking back and forth across her ass. Okay Lizzie, he said as he rubbed her gently. Thanks Scooter. I really had no idea who else to turn to. And maybe even if I did. Let me guess, brothers come first. He squeezed one of her cheeks tenderly. She giggled. You know, you're the smartest dumb guy I know. Keep rubbing my bum, Scooter. I know it's a little sick to have my own brother fondling my butt, but it actually feels kinda nice. For the next 2 hours, he stroked his kid sister's fabulous buns until she fell asleep and or passed out on her lounge chair. He caressed the finest ass he'd ever held, finished their pitcher of daiquiris, and watched the ocean. That's all he did. It was easily one of the best afternoons of his life. The next morning Lizzie woke him again with her finger gently tracing her message across his back. Emu. Waffles. He rolled over to look up at her. She was smiling and already dressed for the beach in a red bikini identical to the black one she'd been wearing yesterday. Her blonde hair was twisted into a long braid that fell down her back. Lizzie was taking precautions today. The surf yesterday had nearly stripped her ponytail off. With her hair pulled back like this, it emphasized her pretty face. And at that moment, her pretty face held a most amused little expression. Crap, he realized too late why she was looking so cheeky. She'd been sitting on his butt when she rode across his back. When he turned over, she ended up sitting side saddle in his lap. His morning erection was gigantic and digging into her tush. To her, it probably felt like sitting across a pipe. And a happy good morning to you, my rather big brother. Very funny, go get started on the waffles. I'll be down in a section. Lizzie didn't tease him. She just nodded and levered herself of him, but not before getting in what he swore was an extra little wriggle. Still, she didn't say a single word until she got to the door of his bedroom. And then she did say something small, right about the time he was deciding whether to masturbate there in bed or wait until he got in the shower. It was like she'd read his mind. Scooter? Don't. And then she was gone. He got himself under control by laying there and thinking about a long series of non-sexy things before he pulled on a suit and joined her for breakfast. After eating, he looked down the beach, then over at his fleet-footed sister as they stepped outside, won a race. Lizzie smirked at him as she tightened the elastic that held her braid in place. What, you didn't get enough waffles at breakfast? You hungry for some disappointment too? Har har, go. He dashed out onto the beach. His surprise start gave him a 2-second lead. He needed a lot more. It was about 100 yards to the ocean. His sister whipped past him before they'd covered 20 of it. He watched her tiny red bikini-wrapped butt race away. No chance in hell he'd catch her. She was already ducking into the surf by the time his much slower feet even hit wet sand. Bah woo. She howled her funny old victory cry and grinned as he finally swam out to join her. Dog girl, he laughed and splashed her. Together, they swam out to the deeper spot he'd picked out yesterday. She stuck out her lip and made puppy dog eyes while she treaded water until he agreed to launch her like he did yesterday too. His hand found the flat of her stomach again, but when his hand gripped her left leg, she reached back and unwrapped his fingers. Mind pushing from my butt instead, Scooter? It was kind of hurting when you kept squeezing my leg so darned hard yesterday. She shamelessly guided his hand up until his palm was pressed firmly between her legs. Richard's pulse quickened and he felt himself instantly grow hard in his trunks. The gap in his sister's legs was warm and soft. He could feel her mound with his palm and his fingers curled slightly over her tiny ass cheeks. Much better, she explained simply. Yet, better, he thought dizzily, but for whom? When the first big wave came, he carefully thrust her forward, his hand pressing hard enough into her crotch that he could feel her pubic bone. She caught the waves curl and surfed off. She swam back and they repeated this process all morning, his hand returning over and over between her legs that she spread eagerly for him. Richard was hard all morning. While his sister was gone, he would slip a hand into his trunks and stroke himself idly beneath the water. He wondered if he could make himself come in the ocean. The answer to that question was no, but not for lack of effort. By noon, they were back on the shaded patio with a pitcher of Mai Tais and reading paperbacks quietly. Halfway through her second drink, Lizzie rolled onto her belly on her lounge chair with her book. She silently reached over and pulled her brother's free hand onto her ass in a not too subtle request for more petting. After a few minutes, she looked up at him with one eye. So how does this butt stuff work, Scooter? Jessica seemed to really like it. He let the Jessica comment pass. It doesn't work any particular way, sis. There's no magic formula or anything. Just patience. You've got to learn to love your own booty. At least we know that you like having it touched. So, this is your genius plan, butt master? You're going to rub my ass. For now. Patience, my young Paduan. Paduan? God, you're such a nerd. Whatever, size queen. Hey, I didn't go looking for Chip's giant sausage, it found me. He kept stroking her perfect ass for a while, sipping his drink and reading his own book, when a gentle next step occurred to him. Sis? Do you masturbate? She looked up with a raised eyebrow. Wow. Okay. Didn't see that question coming. Yeah, sometimes. Why? Just curious. He looked at her for a while before continuing. Any chance you feel like doing it now? Might help you think about your rump in a sexy way. Nuhu, she snickered through her answer. Now let me finish this chapter, would you? They both read, waiting out the midday sun. The entire time, Richard's right hand slowly worked back and forth across his sister's tiny, red-suited butt. By 3 o'clock he'd had enough reading. Ready for another ocean fix, Lizzie? You go ahead. I'll join you in a few minutes. She looked up at him sort of sheepishly. Let me guess, something you need to take care of first. He snickered. Don't be a jerk. Just say it and I'll go. Admit it. You're horny. Fine. I'm horny. Happy? And I need to do something about it or I'm going to get bitchy. So run along, buddy, if you know what's good for you. One last thing. He stretched out a long pause. Show me. Show you what, exactly? This thing you've had me groping for the past 2 days. Just tug your suit down a little and let me see. Trust me, you've got nothing to be ashamed of and I've always been curious. Do it and I'll leave you alone for some quality time. She studied him, actually considering it. Okay, fine, she muttered, then reached down and hooked her thumbs into her suit at its hips. Richard's heart pounded in his ears as she drew it down slowly. He drank in every gorgeous, unveiled inch. She'd shown him her breasts but not this. Never this. He could barely believe it was even happening now. The suit slid down inch by inch, the skin becoming paler as she went, just as smooth and blemish-free as the rest of her. And finally, when her suit bottom was gathered at the tops of her thighs, there it was, the object of his fantasies for years, 2 tiny firm hills that pressed together into a tight cleavage. Utterly and completely perfect. He stared at her ass, hypnotized. Well? She finally asked softly, looking back at him over her shoulder. She swished her rump back and forth with her question and the toned buns flexed smoothly. Richard felt lightheaded as he openly gawked at his little sister's superb ass. Well, what? Do I have a nice one? Lizzie, you've always been. He shook his head to clear it. If you weren't my... He shook it again harder. Yeah, you have a nice one. Just come down and join me when you're done. He patted her head and left her as he promised. He walked down the beach, keeping his hips facing away from his sister to conceal the giant erection that had stretched out inside his bathing suit. He laughed when she joined him in the water barely 5 minutes later, red-cheeked and grinning. She didn't ask him to launch her like he'd done in the morning. Instead they surfed together, competing to see who could ride furthest in towards shore. Later, when they staggered out of the ocean, exhausted and starving, he let her have the first shower. He showered after her and nearly fainted on the spot when he found her in the kitchen again, pulling a bottle of water from the refrigerator. She was wearing nothing but her underwear, a pink bra and matching tiny boy shorts with a bit of lace at the bottom. Sis. He choked out. She answered, still looking in the refrigerator. Clothes. Aw, come on, these cover more than my bikinis do. Yeah, but they're definitely underwear. He blinked as she turned towards him. And they're practically see-through. Really? She looked down in mock amazement. What do you see? Stuff. Your stuff. What? Like nipples. Yeah, he swallowed. A saucy smile he'd never seen before twisted across her face. Say the word, Scooter. Say nipples, she teased softly. Nipples, he whispered, staring at her chest. What else do you see? She tucked her gold hair, still damp from her shower, behind her ear and smiled. Oh, go ahead and look down. I don't mind. Can you see through my panties too? Yeah, he croaked. See anything? No fur. Nope. Exactly. No fur at all, she giggled as she breezed past him. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to pick out a nice dress to wear for when you take me out for dinner. We're going out. Yup, she confirmed over her shoulder. She came back in a light orange strapless beach wrap that made him dizzy just looking at her. Her hair was still damp and loose, falling a few inches past her shoulders. Worst of all, the puckered nipples visible through its fabric made it clear she'd removed her bra. He refused to give her the satisfaction of commenting. They went out to a local seafood dive on the waterfront. They drank beer and stuffed themselves on shellfish. The entire night, Richard was conscious of the looks his sister was drawing in the restaurant. Men old and young eyed her with interest. She was well behaved the whole time though. She didn't flirt or tease him. Whatever had possessed her in the kitchen had gone away, For all intents and purposes, she was his sweet kid sister again. Right up until they got home and parted for their separate rooms. "Good night, Scooter," she smiled up at him as she went on tiptoes to kiss his nose good night. Then she fixed him with a smoky look while she pecked him on the lips twice. Between those pecks, she repeated what she'd said that morning, "Don't." "Don't what?" He smirked. "Just don't, okay, smart guy." She nibbled her lower lip and left him standing there in the hallway. He woke to Imu. Oatmeal. They ate. They went out in the surf again. He endured her body hanging on him and rubbing against him mercilessly underwater, even the feeling of her stomach and ass in his hands as they played in the waves. She was wearing a white bikini cut even more daringly. The top barely covered her nipples and the bottom left nearly half of her ass was exposed. If this kept up, he'd go insane. By midday they were back on the patio. He made mint juleps and the bourbon hit Lizzie hard. She'd barely finished her second one when, without a word, she tugged her white bikini bottom down all the way to her knees. She looked over at her brother and arched her eyebrow. She didn't need to move his hand for him. He reached over on his own, his hand circling her bare little ass gently. It was only a few minutes later that she was shifting in her chair. "Okay, Scooter, I'm horny." "That's good. Now go play in the ocean for a few minutes, will you?" "No way, it's too early. Still way too hot out there." "Why?" He kept stroking her ass in slow circles. "You know why, jerk. So go ahead and do what you want, Lizzie. I'm not leaving and I'm certainly not stopping you." "Seriously?" she asked timidly. "Seriously," he said as casually as he could. "Don't mess with me. I'm drunk enough and horny enough to actually do it," she warned. "Nobody's messing with you. I'll just read my book over here and you do whatever you need to do." "Fine." He watched her right hand slip under her hip. She moaned softly and he watched her elbow begin to move in circles as she touched herself. She was soon panting into the cushion of her chair and arching her ass up into his hand eagerly for his stroking. "Scooter? Could you, just kinda, maybe just a little?" She reached back with her free hand and steered his fingers into her crease. He slid them up and down her crack carefully and she let out a long slow breath. He caressed the delicate skin in the middle. He began to toy at the roughened little pucker hidden inside as she continued touching herself. But it was too dry. He knew there would be plenty of wetness drooling from her opening, but he was afraid to dip down, to cross that line, to break the spell. "Hold on a sec, sis." He dabbed some suntan lotion on his fingertips and went back to touching her, now gently circling her ring and feeling the muscle there slowly begin to relax and soften. Lizzie was panting by now and eager for more. She wriggled until his finger was centered on her rear entrance. "Scooter? Little more." He pressed gently, fingertip sliding just barely inside, and she shuddered, muscles twitching up and down her back. She was clearly ready to come. She was rushing, excited by the new sensations. Her arm was moving frantically. "Touch yourself slower, sis," he whispered. "Can't," she hissed. "Slower," he repeated gently. She looked back at him with a cute little snarl, almost feral. She'd come when she pleased. And she pleased now. Feisty words died on her lips when her orgasm hit. Humping down into her own hand, she grunted and rolled through a fabulous peak. He continued slipping his fingertip in and out of her ass gently as she rode it out. She went limp on the lounge chair. "Holy crap, that was hot," she murmured when she'd finally caught her breath. "See? Not so bad, right?" No, I guess not." She clumsily pulled her suit bottom back up, suddenly self-conscious. "Wow, that seriously wiped me out. I think I need a nap." Without a word, he stood and knelt. He picked his drowsy sister up and carried her towards her bedroom. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her little nose nuzzling at his throat. A thrill went through him when she pressed her lips there. Her kisses worked up his neck to his chin. She paused, hesitating as she pushed herself through this little taboo. He could feel her breath on this face. Then she kissed him on the lips. It was the first time they'd kissed like this since he'd given her that first one, years ago. Her lips melted perfectly into his just as he laid her gently on her bed, then tried to step away. To leave her to sleep. To get away from her so that he didn't do something stupid. But her arms held tight around his neck. "Stay," she whispered, never opening her eyes. "Snuggle." So he did. She made room and he slid onto her bed on his back. She rested her head on his chest. "Scooter, can we do some more practice later?" "Sure. Thanks, bro." "Imu," she said drowsily. "Okay, seriously, what the fuck does that mean?" She smiled and fell asleep. The mint juleps and the swimming and the sun and the warmth of his sister's barely clothed body snuggled into him eventually won out over Richard's ridiculous arousal too. They had an excellent nap. So good that they slept through their usual afternoon session in the ocean. Richard woke first. It was late afternoon and they were covered by a light blanket she'd pulled up from the foot of the bed. In their sleep, they'd rotated into their sides and spooned. His erection, harder now than he could ever remember, was nestled in his sister's tiny and warm ass. He shifted, getting ready to roll away when she turned onto her stomach. His hand, on her hip a moment ago, was on her butt again. He stroked it automatically and she wriggled it in response, even in her sleep. The chance to touch Lizzie's fabulous rump was still too tempting. He stroked, squeezed, and massaged it softly. Her eyes finally opened when he tugged her suit bottom down off her ass and left it down at her knees beneath the blanket. He watched her smile and close her eyes again. She licked her lips when his fingers slid inwards across her upturned ass cheek. He dipped into the tiny crack and brushed up and down across her sphincter. Her right arm slid down and under her hip to touch herself again like when they were on the patio. He teased and toyed at her round little hole and tapped at its center gently. This close to her face, and with her eyes closed, he could see how long his sister's eyelashes were. Some of her blonde hair had fallen across her face too. Her simple beauty and the sheer raunchiness of what their hands were doing beneath the blanket was driving him mad with lust. He was pouring pre-cum into his bathing suit. He watched her face carefully as he pressed inwards against her delicate rosebud. Her nose twitched in a very cute way. "Wait a sec." She rolled onto her back and lifted the leg closer to him. She pulled his hand under that leg and he went back to toying at her tiny hole from this new and strange angle. "Easier for me to touch myself like this," she said softly. Together, they tinkered between her legs until her face was flushed and her breath was ragged. Then her hand stopped. She slid it downwards to meet his. She teetered along the way to wet her fingers at her opening, then carefully slick-kenned his first finger with her juices. She dipped up and into her own wetness again. She returned to nudge his hand out of the way and moistened her own backdoor. "Better," she sighed, her hand disappearing up again to touch herself. Her eyes were thin, hungry slits when her head rolled on the pillow to face him. He pressed his slick-kenned finger to her wet ring and felt it begin to give way. He watched as her lips puckered and she exhaled while his finger slowly slid into her ass to the first knuckle. She hunched up so eagerly that he corkscrewed it gently to his second knuckle. They paused for a few moments. The only sounds were the distant ocean, their breathing, and the soft rustle of the blanket as Lizzie continued masturbating. "More," she said quietly. He sank his finger deeper into his sister's tiny rectum, struggling against its absurd tightness. Her mouth fell open and she panted a few soft ha-ha-has as her brother worked all the way into her velvety tight hole. Her hand was flying back and forth across her clit. When he drew his finger halfway out and sank it back in, Lizzie gasped and shook. "Again," she pleaded softly. "He did." "Again," she repeated her plea. He was giddy as he began to gently finger-fuck his kid sister's miniature hole. After just a couple of minutes, she stopped him by reaching down to catch his wrist. He assumed she'd had enough play at her inexperienced entrance. He was wrong. Incredibly, she circled his second finger and pressed it to her tiny back door too. Her tongue flicked out to lick her upper lip as they started to ease into her together. Her big brown eyes locked on his. Her sphincter slowly yielded. So good, Scooter. So fucking wrong and nasty and good. I can see why people get into this, she moaned. She bit her lower lip as he gently sank his 2 fingers deep into her tiny hole and began to gently saw them in and out of her ass. By this point, his own bathing suit was a soaking wet mess. Talk dirty to me, she asked quietly between gasping and twitching. Sure, let's see. Mildew. Pond scum. Mouse droppings. Ew. Kman, you know what I mean. Sexy dirty. You mean how my fingers, your own brother's fingers, are sliding in and out of your ass? You're very small back here, sis. Very small. I can tell nobody has had you this way. It's a good thing you're excited. I can feel you dripping down onto my fingers and it's helping a lot. He was stretching her tender back hole with both fingers. He could feel her reluctant opening relaxing little by little. Jesus, Scooter, I'm on fire right now. Keep talking. I could tell you what it's going to be like when you let someone fuck you back there. I think you're going to like it, sis. Maybe not the first time. It's going to be a struggle and a stretch. Like the first time you had regular sex. Remember? Yeah, that did kinda hurt, she nodded. You'll need to be patient, Lizzie. It's going to feel like hell at first. For you anyway. For Chip, it's going. For who? Chip. Your fiancé. Oh yeah, him, she giggled. Sorry. Lizzie's eyes finally opened. They were dark and glassy and unfocused. Guess I can't think so good when you're doing this. Going to come soon, big, huge, keep going just like this. Fuck, this feels good. He smiled and continued working his fingers in and out of the strangling heat of her ass. Beneath the blanket, his kid sister's entire body began to shake haphazardly. Her breathing was shallow and uneven and her tanned cheeks were glowing a brilliant cherry red. Scooter? Kiss me. She was dizzy now, almost looking past him as she asked. He didn't argue. He pressed his lips to her mouth. Her lips opened immediately and she pulled his tongue inside. It was the last thing she needed. Lizzie moaned into his mouth as her hips shot up off the bed and she came with a dirty mishmash of syllables that amazed him. Goddamn motherfucking so fucking ugh in my ass ugh Jesus Christ. The string of expletives was impressively complete. He kissed her forehead and continued pumping his fingers in and out of her clutching ass as her orgasm stretched out. When she'd finished, he rolled onto his back and reached into his suit. He was so excited he didn't care that she was laying next to him. He'd be able to make himself come in less than a minute. Scooter. Lizzie looked at him and nibbled her lip sexily. Don't. Please. She gave him the big puppy dog eyes again. He groaned and stopped, mad with frustration. Why did she get to come and he didn't? And why did she care? You're evil, sis. Ah, now you notice. She grinned wickedly. Maybe we could get some dinner, she asked as she reached down and pulled her suit bottom back up beneath the blanket. For some reason, I'm starving all of a sudden. Come on, I'll take you someplace nice. My treat tonight. They showered and dressed. He found her waiting on the patio with an empty drink in her hand. He stopped at the door to look at her. She was leaning on the patio's railing and looking out at the ocean. She was wearing a thin yellow sundress with spaghetti shoulder straps that clung to her slender body enough that he could make out the telltale T of a thong through it. It was cut low enough across the back to make it clear that she was braless again too. The orange light of the setting sun was glinting off her gold hair, twisted up off her neck casually. She looked comfortable and sexy and elegant all at the same time. She'd heard him behind her. I love the air here, she sighed. The view's pretty good too, he murmured. Perv. Come here. Hold me. He wrapped his arms around her. Feeling cheap after what we just did? Feeling frisky. Really? That was really hot. In fact, I got myself off in the shower again just thinking about what my brother did to me. Aha, now who's the perv? You're rubbing off on me. Kiss my neck a little. When he did, she pressed herself back against him and felt the full length of his erection, that because of me. Yep, he took her backwards push as an invitation and pushed himself into her firmly. His breath caught when she did one better by arching her ass and spreading her cheeks slightly. It trapped him snugly between her buns and she squeezed him teasingly. I thought you said you wanted dinner, he said cautiously. Fuck it. Let's order in. She laughed a little. You know, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I've always gotten a kick out of messing with you. Showing you a bit of skin. Wearing something skimpy or tight and feeling your eyes linger on me. There were times that you made me feel pretty when I wasn't sure about my body. You made me feel good about myself when I needed it most, Scooter. I'm sorry if that was cruel to you back then. Don't feel bad, sis. Your flirting made some great memories for me too. Scooter? Do you think that maybe next time we practice we could try with your thingy? Seriously? Yeah, why not? How else am I supposed to learn? I don't know. I guess I figured you would wander off and use, a toy of some kind. Why would I ever want something cold and fake and plastic when I have a very warm and real and wonderful man to try it with? Geez sis, the stuff we did before was bad. What you're saying is a whole different level of wrong. What, don't you want me, Scooter? You honestly don't want to sink yourself in my last little virgin hole? She looked back at him over her shoulder slyly. All Richard could get out was a weak groan. Achman, she pressed herself against him, parts of you want me. We can both feel how hard you are, she said softly. I think we just need your brain to catch up. How about this? I'll beg you. I'll beg you to do it. I'll beg you until you have to say yes. Would that make this easier for you? She ground her fabulous rump back against him eagerly and her voice took on a hungry, plaintive edge he'd never heard before. Please do it, Richie. Please take my little bum. Please? I want you to. You were the first boy to kiss me and the first one I showed my new breasts to. I let someone else take my real cherries, so it's too late for that. I've regretted it ever since. But this. I still have this for you. You'd be the first man there. My big brother could still come first. She took a long slow dramatic breath. Please. She mewed softly, like a kitten that hadn't been fed. You mean like, now? He finally managed to speak. Yeah, it felt really good this afternoon. And it's so warm out right now. I just had a nice long and satisfying shower. I even had a good stiff drink too. I feel relaxed and horny in a slow, lazy kind of way. I can't imagine a better mood to be in. His willpower evaporated. Okay. Bedroom. Let's go. Out here. On the patio. Yeah, I want to be with you for the first time just like this. With the sun on our skin and the breeze in our faces. It's perfect. So, how do we do it? Stick your tush out. And drape yourself over the railing. He knelt down behind her and slowly drew the yellow fabric of her sundress up, unveiling her gorgeous sleek runner's legs and her spectacular miniature butt. It was framed in a tiny, white thong that disappeared into the tight cleavage formed by her little buns. He folded the fabric up and onto the small of her back, then leaned in and planted a smooch on his sister's ass. He could see the tiny, bare bulge of her naked mound too. She smiled and reached around to pat his head. Funny, I've been telling you to kiss my ass for years, Scooter. I've been wanting to kiss your ass for just as long. He slid the thong down her legs and off, tossing it away. She shivered as his tongue traced circles up and down and across her upturned cheeks. She moaned when he nuzzled into her crease and began to lap at her virgin rose. "Ooh, that's nice," she cooed, "keep doing that, bro." He rimmed her for several minutes until she was gasping and he couldn't wait any longer. He stood and jerked his pants down, then pressed himself against her, humping his shaft up and down between her cheeks, drooling precum into her crevice. He centered himself on her tiny hole and watched her grip the deck railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. He pressed himself inwards as slowly as he could, but she still struggled. "Ugh," his little sister groaned, "easy, Scooter. I'm new at this, remember?" "Sorry," he winced, "my fault." "Wait, first." She reached back and her small hand wrapped around his cock for the first time. He nearly came right then. It got worse when she angled him down slightly and rubbed him against her smoothly shaven pussy. She pressed him inwards more and more firmly until his tip spread her smooth little lips and he felt the entrance of her vagina suction onto him hungrily. "Sis," he said with confusion, and he felt himself sinking slowly into her pussy. This was not what they'd talked about. "SHHH. I just want you nice and slippery. I'm soaking wet. Handy hey." She humped back against him, forcing his cock slowly into the wet, clutching heat of her teenage sex. It made his knees buckle. His cock was in his sister. Inside her. She kept pushing back against him and his shaft slowly sank deeper. They both groaned as her slender body opened up around him until his hips met her ass. She was tight, incredibly tight. In a crazed moment, it occurred to Richard that Chip must not be fucking her as often as he should have been. They humped together several times. He nearly forgot about everything else as he gripped her narrow hips and drilled himself in and out of her little body. Her insides sucked at him and she limberly rotated her tiny ass in his crotch, swirling him deep inside her and cooing appreciatively with each of her brother's thrusts. Somehow though, Lizzie didn't forget their plan. She slowly pulled herself forward far enough that he popped free of her clutching tight pussy. "Okay," she hissed, "now do the other thing. Hurry. Before I lose my nerve." She bent over the railing more deeply and curved her ass higher into the air, swishing it back and forth. He pressed himself into her crack again. He felt her opening spread slowly as he drilled himself firmly against her little star. "Gyoh," she whimpered as his cock began to win its struggle and his tip slowly sank into her. Her knees shook crazily with the force of his invasion. Still, she bravely pressed herself back into him, driving another inch of his shaft into her rectum until she couldn't bear any more. "Wait, don't move," she hissed and stopped for several seconds before nodding for him to continue. Richard gaped down at the vision of half his cock wedged between his kid sister's ass cheeks. "Okay, more," she finally whispered. Together, with a few pauses for her to catch her breath, they painstakingly worked his cock into her virgin asshole. "You okay, sis?" he said when he was buried inside her. "Barely. I hope this gets better soon," she gritted out through clenched teeth. "Move a little bit, let's see." "Ugh," she grunted when he pulled out slightly and pressed back into her ass. He felt bad for causing her discomfort, but not bad enough to keep from coming. Early. And hard. He couldn't help it. He'd gotten overexcited. But who could blame him? His own sister was bent over in front of him and he was balls deep in her gorgeous little 19-year-old track star butt. "Are you?" His sister's head whipped around just as he began spewing cum into her straining rear hole. They had taken several minutes to so slowly and carefully wriggled his cock through her miniature sphincter only to have him come almost instantly. She looked back at him in amazement as he continued coming. He streamed more than a dozen giant spurts into her ass, bathing her struggling insides. "Wow," she grinned back at him, "aren't you glad you saved it all up?" "Ah, so that's what that was all about," he shook his head. "MMMHMM, I wanted a nice fireworks show for my first time," she half smiled. "It was over pretty quick though, wasn't it, Scooter? Is it supposed to go that quick?" "No. I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've had sex and I've been really worked up and this is just totally fucking hot. He bent over and rested his forehead against the soft, tan skin between her shoulder blades to try and get a grip on himself. Guess it feels pretty good in my tushy, hey. You have no idea. Just gimme a sec, sis. If you want, we can keep going. There's no way in hell I'm going soft inside your perfect little butt. She swished her ass back and forth experimentally, wincing slightly. Ew, it's all warm and slippery inside me now. It's actually kinda cool. She made an even funnier face as she wiggled herself a bit more on him. You know what? It's actually better like this. Well, there's plenty more where that came from. Good. Her bright eyes locked onto his with a serious determination that he'd never seen before. "'Cause I want it all, Scooter. Everything in you. You're going to do me again right now to run your nuts dry. Then we're going to go to sleep in my bed. And when we wake up, I want more of this before either of us say good morning. Got it?" She twisted her neck and he craned forward to meet her. Her lips dissolved into his, tongue teasing him skillfully. She tasted like the gin she must have been drinking earlier. "That's it, bro, open me up. Open me up with that nice thick tool of yours. Feeling better? Meh, at last it doesn't hurt anymore. It's a start anyway. But not feeling good either. Still, it's crazy hot knowing that it's my big brother's noodle that's buried in my butt." She looked back at him and smiled. "You going to come again, stud?" "God yes." "Good. So far, I like that part the most." She reached back between her legs and he felt her small hand gently fondle his swinging balls. As she caressed him, he sawed in and out of her rectum, watching his shaft disappear and reappear between his sister's little ass cheeks. He lasted all of another 5 minutes before he came again, jetting another enormous load into her ass. This time, he gently eased himself out of her and stepped away. His sister stood up carefully and stretched her back, moving slowly and stiffly. She'd been bent over the entire time. Her dress slid back down into place to cover her and she turned to face him and leaned back against the railing to steady her weak legs. "Whoa," her face screwed up cutely, "I can feel all of your stuff up inside me. It's kinda crazy. Kinda hot too. Really? Yeah, I'm getting turned on. A lot. Wow. I think I actually could make myself. I think I need to." Her hand slid down and under the front of her dress. Through the thin fabric, he watched her cup and twirl at her mound eagerly. "Go ahead, Lizzie," he said softly. "Here." "Sure, why not? Right in front of you again. I don't think now is the time to get shy." "Good point, I mean, I guess after what we just did. Well, when you put it that way." She began to touch herself more urgently. Her lips curled up cutely. "Ew, your stuff, it wants to come out. I gotta go. I'll be right back." She leaned away from the railing. He steered her backwards to a little table on the patio and leaned her against its edge instead. "Stay. I want to see." They both heard a drip of semen fall from beneath her dress and onto the patio with a small splat. Liz groaned and slipped her hand under her dress again, rubbing herself harder. "Ugh, this is nasty, Scooter. Nastier coming out than going in." "Ahoy," she whimpered. He watched a small stream of cum appear on the patio again. "Oh wow, wait, there's still more. Jesus, brother. So much cum." Another dollop followed. "Oh God. Scooter." His sister mewled, looking at him through slitted eyes. What followed was the rawest, nakedest, most beautiful thing Richard had ever seen. His kid sister herked and jerked and frigged herself in front of him as his cum leaked from her no longer virgin ass. The well-toned muscles of her legs quivered and her breasts shook beneath her little dress. "Gah-ha-ha-ha," Lizzie rolled and retched as her orgasm approached. fuck 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 fuck. She whimpered, hunching into her own hand and shaking her head as her climax seized her slender body. She finally wailed as she peaked and one long last string of semen dripped out of her and down onto the patio. Her face scrunched up and her body curled in on itself and shook for several long glorious moments. When she finished, her head hung loosely from her neck, drained completely by the entire experience. He let her catch her breath, then took her hand. "Come on Lizzie, let's go get showered up again." She nodded weakly. He left the lights off and led her into the darkened bathroom. He undressed them both in the thin light, rinsed her off in the shower, and dried them both. They slipped, exhausted, into bed. Dinner was long forgotten. Her tracing finger across his back woke him up again the next morning. "Imu. Omelets. After. Good morn," he started to say as he rolled over. She silenced him by pressing a finger to his lips. She was completely naked and crouched next to him, breasts dangling and swaying temptingly as she moved. He marveled at their roundness and the tightness of her little pink nipples as she silently peeled the sheet off his body. "Oh right," he remembered giddily, she'd said yesterday that there would be sodomy before talking. His morning erection helped. Without a word, she straddled her lean body over him and backed her way down to center her ass on his hard shaft. She was still absurdly tight, but she managed to work herself onto him more easily now. He realized she was already slippery with something. She'd used some sort of lubricant. The thought of his sister waking up and sneaking off to quietly lube her own asshole first thing in the morning sent a deviant thrill up his spine that hardened his morning erection even more. He felt himself spreading the walls of her rectum. Lizzie paused several times on the way down her brother's shaft to adjust. When her lap met his, she grimaced and stopped. She pointed to the nightstand. He smiled and reached for the scrunchie she wanted, then watched her pull her golden hair up into a quick bun. She looked determined. Sure enough, she began to ride up and down on him carefully, wincing as she did it. Her round, perky tits rocked up and down with her movements. His eyes slid downwards. When she saw him look at their intersection, she smiled, spread her legs and cocked her hips forward so he could see better. He watched the tight lips of her bald pussy flex and pucker each time his cock slid in and out of the straining ring of her ass. She answered his question before he could ask it. "Yeah, it feels better than yesterday already, Scooter," she whispered. "I think I like anal." "Well, with you anyway." He felt his shaft lurch in response. She shifted her body to one side to free up an arm. She brought a hand down to play at her clit, swirling it around the hardened bud in a way that made her pant. Unfortunately for Richard, he was learning that there is simply no better way to wake up in the morning than having your beautiful baby sister fuck herself in the ass with your dick. Richard went from asleep to ready to come in less than 2 minutes. He managed to gasp his short warning, "Lizzie." It was the best he could manage under the circumstances. He exploded as Lizzie worked at herself furiously, trying to catch up to her brother. She failed. His softening shaft slid from her ass before she could get herself off. "Wow, it really must feel good in my butt, hey." She smirked down at him. "I swear to God, you have no idea. You know, I'm seriously getting robbed here. You lasted a lot longer with Jessica. Please take it as a compliment, sis. It's way better with you than it was with her." He rocked up onto his elbows. "And while we're on the subject, I can't believe how much she told you about all this. Seriously, did she leave anything out at all?" The smirk his sister was wearing turned into a frown. "Okay, I should fess up to this," she grumbled. She took a deep breath. "Scooter, Jess didn't tell me anything. I watched you. Back then. I watched you have sex with her. I was peeking through your bedroom door." "What?" "I know, I'm sorry. It was a bad thing to do. In some ways, I wish I hadn't. You have no idea what it was like to just sit there and watch you fuck my best friend, Scooter. Watch you do everything to her. See how good you made her feel. I couldn't look away. The whole time, I was wishing it was me, okay? I wanted to be the one in that bed with you. Oh. His answer came out small. But there was a stirring in his groin that said a lot more, and Lizzie noticed. She smiled. Don't move. I'll be right back. I'm not done with you. She came back from the bathroom with a warm washcloth and tenderly wiped his slowly hardening shaft. She tossed the washcloth to the floor and leaned in closer to his cock, nuzzling it against her cheek. Her enormous brown eyes were locked onto his face as she did it. She started kissing and lapping at him, then drew him into her mouth for a long and determined suck. She practically vacuumed blood into this shaft to finish its hardening. He watched as she slunk back up his body to straddle him again. She leaned forward and down to kiss him sweetly first. She pulled her scrunchie free and let her soft blonde hair fall around their faces. Scooter? Could we maybe, the regular way, just once? She reached back and dragged his tip up and down between her tiny lips, already wet and swollen. Yes, I'd like that very much. He barely got the last word out before she started sinking herself down on him. Ooh, Scooter, she moaned as she stretched to fit him in this entrance too. It was easier going there. She was hot and tight but super slick inside. She ground herself steadily downwards onto him until he was sheathed inside her completely. He groaned when she swirled her hips around in tight circles. She shivered, clearly savoring the friction at her clit and the satisfying fullness of his cock deep in her belly. She screwed her face up in concentration and lifted off him, then dropped back down. Her nostrils flared when he bottomed out inside her. She did it again. Then again. She rode him for a few minutes, eyes wide and glittery and hair swinging wildly, before rolling off him onto her back. Get on top, bro. I want to feel you above me. Pressing down on me and filling me up. I've thought about us like this before. I can finally have it now, can't I? You can have anything you want, Lizzie. He moved on top of her and sank into her slick, dripping sex. Her young vagina sucked at him eagerly, and he began thrusting into her steadily enough to make her breasts and hair sway again with their fucking. Perfect, Scooter. Keep fucking me just like this. Keep pounding your horny little sister, and she'll come for you. Just like she's wanted to. Just like she's meant to. Wow, you're way naughtier than I ever imagined, kiddo. He leaned down to kiss her again as they ground together. Always been like this, you just never noticed. She ducked his kiss to suck on his chin, then nip at it gently. He groaned and did exactly what she wanted. He fucked her harder. He drove her slender body down into the mattress beneath them, bottoming out inside her at the end of each stroke. It sent pleasure-pain tingles through her hips. She moaned and cooed in response to the more energetic screwing. Her arms flew around his back and she clawed at his skin. They were fucking now, really and truly fucking in the way they'd both secretly fantasized about over the years. It was wonderful. It was magical. It was everything they'd furtively conjured in their twisted little minds. Of course, it's also when they heard a knock at the front door of the house. They both froze, eyes flying wide open. Their mother's voice. What the hell was she doing there already? Their mother unwittingly answered their question. I took off a couple of days from work and drove down early. Thought I'd surprise you. Surprise was right. Thank God the front door was locked, but then Richard pictured the door at the house's rear. It was open and they were on ground level. If their mom came around. He did the only thing he could think of. Still joined at their middle, he picked his sister up off the bed and carried her into the bathroom and shut the door. He plunked her down on the bathroom counter. Moments after the bathroom door shut, from inside the house now, Thurik? Lizzie. She'd found the open door. If their mother caught them, they were dead. No doubt about it. He started quietly reciting the Lord's Prayer with his erection buried deep inside his own sister. He knew he'd be explaining that to St. Peter someday. Richard might be the family brains, but Lizzie, bless her, had always better under pressure. She smirked and snaked her arm out, then pushed the little button on the knob of the bathroom door to lock it. "I'm in here, Mom," she said loudly. "Just having some trouble with breakfast. Too much pineapple, I think." "You're not throwing up, are you? Is it morning sickness? Are you pregnant?" His sister rolled her eyes at him. "Why is that everybody's first thought?" she whispered. He shrugged, keeping quiet. "No, Mom. I'm not pregnant." Then Lizzie's eyes took on an evil gleam. "At least, not yet anyway." His sister humped against him, driving herself further onto his cock. Somehow, despite his complete terror, he was still hard. He didn't move as Lizzie humped up again and ground herself against him smoothly. "You sure you're all right, Lizzie? You sound funny." "Ahoy. I'm good." Her lips pursed appreciatively as she carefully pumped herself fully on his shaft. Oh God, his sister was enjoying this. "In fact, I think I'm feeling better already, Mom." "Good. Good. Where's Richie, honey?" "Oh, he's around here somewhere. Down at the beach. Maybe." Lizzie answered dully, losing focus as she silently fucked herself on him and her pleasure mounted. She hadn't come yet and she needed to get off desperately. Her little tongue slipped out to the corner of her mouth in concentration and the adorable sight made Richard groan softly. "His bathing suit is right here on the floor, though." He's got more than one, Mom. He's not running around naked, I promise." Lizzie rolled her eyes and kept using her brother's cock hungrily. "I certainly hope not." Richard was going out of his mind. Jesus, this was insane. His sister was fucking him a dozen feet from our mother with less than 2 inches of pine door between them. There was more adrenaline in his bloodstream than water at this point. His fear and arousal twisted and piled on top of each other. He couldn't hold out against it for long. He looked down at his sister. Liz knew the signs by now. "Don't you dare," she threatened softly, glaring up at him. "Come inside you." "Not on the pill," he whispered back. "No, I mean come before me." "Of course, I'm on the pill." Their mother interrupted from outside. "You still okay, Lizzie? Were you talking to me?" "Yeah, I'm okay," his sister called back. "I was just practicing my wedding vows." Richard's mouth fell open in amazement at his sister's outrageous answer. She grinned up at him, but her own depravity got the best of her. She couldn't hold it together and she burst into giggles. The laughing fit made her stop screwing herself up into him. "You're wicked," he gasped quietly, taking over and thrusting gently in and out of her drooling, overheated little pussy. "Marriage isn't funny, honey. I hope you're taking this seriously." "Sorry, Mom. I am," his sister sighed. She nibbled her lip for a moment and did some first-rate thinking under the circumstances. "Hey Mom. You know, there's a whole bunch of stores down in town that are having some kind of sidewalk sale today. There's tons of pretty sarongs and stuff. Why don't you walk around down there for a while I get sorted out?" "Well, I could use some more beach clothes." "Sure you're going to be okay?" "Yeah." Lizzie's answer came as a moan as her brother pushed her legs up and hooked them over his shoulders. From this angle, he could just brush the bottom of his sister's vagina again, and from her eager nods he could tell it's what she needed. "Okay, I'll be back in time for lunch. Hope you feel better." "Already, feeling better," Liz cooed as her brother sank fully inside her over and over. "Have fun, Mom." They continued quietly humping for another minute. "Okay, she's long gone now," his sister looked up at him. "Quit messing around. I need you to fuck me like you mean it. You've been cautious in my ass and I appreciate it, but this is not my ass. I've missed having a guy just go crazy on top of me. Do it." Take me. Please. He bore down on her again and she groaned gratefully as he pistoned his full length in and out of her sucking wet depths. That's it, Scooter. Ahoy. Fuck your wicked, little sister. Ugh. Sis. His telltale warning came again. Don't you dare. Brothers, come first, he gasped apologetically. Not, what that means, bastard, she complained as she quickly slid a hand down to her clit and started rubbing herself, racing to come before he gave out. He won again. He didn't mean to. He tried to hold out. But being in his sister's pussy for the first time and barely avoiding getting caught doing it and just looking down at her tiny tight young body twisting and wiggling beneath him, it was all too much. He came. Fortunately, Lizzie was right behind him. He felt her insides squeezing him rhythmically and it was almost impossible, but he managed to jerk himself out of her to let his cum jet up onto her belly and breasts. Ropes of thick, white semen crisscrossed her body by the time he was finished. Shower. He looked down at her, still gasping. Definitely, she snickered, admiring the sticky mess he'd made of her. They stepped in and shampooed and soaped each other sloppily, laughing as they coated each other in lather. The giggling came to an abrupt stop when Lizzie turned her back to him and bent herself over at the waist. Up for more booty practice? Lizzie looked back at him hopefully. Believe it or not, I'm still a little frisky. I think I need to recharge. My last orgasm was a doozy. But, if you want, I could. You could what? Her eyebrows knit together in a cute way. He spun her to face him again and pressed her slender body back against the tile. He slid down to his knees in front of her and kissed her at her stomach. He marveled at the large, keyhole space between her slender thighs before nuzzling her smoothly shaven mound. He'd been thinking about getting his mouth on her since she'd pointed out her hairlessness while standing in the kitchen in her underwear. Really? She smiled down at him. Sure, why not? We've done just about everything else. Okay, I will take you up on this. Since you're offering. She shifted and spread her legs, then laced her fingers through his hair and pulled him to her. He gently, tenderly ate his sister there in the shower as the water streamed down on them. She was right. She was frisky again. Her little button was swollen and hard already. He teased her a little, exploring the silky softness of her folds with his tongue. She was sweet and tart and musky all at the same time. He settled into a steady licking at her pebble-like clitoris and she whimpered and pulled her brother into herself urgently. He stroked her long sleek thighs as he lapped at her baby soft slit. Minutes later, her orgasm racked her body. She dug her fingernails into his shoulder and moaned his name over and over, Scooter, Scooter, Scooter. Each time she said it, the pitch of her voice rose until it cracked and she squealed softly, breath hissing through her little lips. When she'd finished and started breathing again, he rested his cheek against one of her thighs, letting her shake out her final twitches of satisfaction. You know, she looked down at him finally, if I had any idea you were so good at that, I would have climbed up onto your face in the middle of the night years ago. Bummer hey. He smirked up at her. They were watching TV by the time their mother came back. They had lunch together and it was back to being a regular family again. Richard was uncharacteristically quiet, but Lizzie seemed to slip back into her old role easily. It was harder for him. He kept glancing at his sister. She was dressed innocently in shorts and a t-shirt, but she was still beautiful. Still sexy. He wanted her in a way a brother just shouldn't. This was going to be difficult. Lizzie seemed to sense his discomfort. She distracted their mother with hours of girl talk and he was grateful. By the time they'd eaten their dinner, played a few rounds of cards and said their good nights, Richard was practically sulking. He flopped onto his bed and laid there, listening to the waves outside. He tried to get his sister's beautiful naked body out of his head. She was getting married soon. This thing, whatever it was, that they'd shared was over. One last big experiment for Lizzie. A final fling. He didn't remember falling asleep. He only realized that he was asleep when he woke up. It was the middle of the night and a familiar finger was tracing along his back in the dark. It shook nervously. Imu. Not getting married. His stomach rolled and his heart soared. What? He rolled over to look up at the faint outline of his sister in the thin light. Shhhh, come on, let's go down to the beach. We need to talk and I don't want to wake Mom up. He felt her weight disappear from the mattress. When he made his way through the house silently and onto the sand, he could see his sister looking out at the sea. Even this far away, he could tell she was naked. Naked and gorgeous in the light of the slim moon that bounced off the ocean. As he walked closer, she turned sideways and he saw her in profile. The round purred breasts atop the thin line of her body. Her nipples were long and hard in the cool night air. Her hair trailed behind her in the light breeze. It made his heart ache. As much as he wanted to stand there and stare, he needed answers more. But when he reached her, she didn't want to talk yet. He could tell by the way she pressed herself against him and pulled his arms around her. Scooter, be with me, one more time? Please? I'll never ask you for anything else ever again, I promise. Then I'll tell you what you need to know. She fell to her knees in the sand in front of him and pulled his half-hard cock into her mouth. She bobbed up and down on him lovingly, sucking and licking as she did it. She used everything she'd ever learned to please him, to make him as hard as possible. If he was angry with her later, this might be their last time. When he'd swollen as large as he'd ever been, she turned and fell onto her hands and knees in the sand. She hunched her tiny ass in circles. Like this, I've wanted it like this with you too. Ever since you started calling me dog girl. Is that silly? Come fuck me, Scooter. Come fuck your little dingo sister. He fell to his own knees behind her and palmed each of her firm miniature cheeks in his hands, spreading them. He moved up closer and slid his drooling tip up and down between each of her entrances, teasing. Where? He asked softly. She wriggled just as eagerly at both. If only you had two of those things, Scooter. I want you everywhere at the same time. I really don't care where you fuck me anymore, everything feels good with you. She was looking back over her shoulder at him tenderly. He made his decision, slipping down and popping himself into her pussy. He hadn't come there yet. Hadn't staked his claim there. Damn you, Chip. Oh Lizzie, he moaned as they merged. The night air was cool and she was nervous. It meant she was only half wet and the extra friction was delicious for them both. I know, me too, Scooter. This is perfect. Fuck me. Please. I've dreamed of this. Waited for it. Prayed for it. Your dick in me just like this. Filling me up. Feel me getting wetter for you already now? I'm dripping, Scooter. It's running down my leg. They fell silent as he drove himself into her over and over, their bodies smacking. She let him have his fun for a while, let him ravage her clasping, hungry vagina. Slower for me, Scooter. Slower and deeper. I want to come for you just like this, she groaned. He watched her lower her shoulders and rest one of them in the sand. Her hand slid under her and one stroked his swaying balls. Her fingers were so warm and soft. She teased him by scratching gently at his delicate skin with her nails. Her other hand found her clit. He could feel the walls of her pussy snap tighter and hotter around him as she played with herself. They fucked gleefully, shamelessly in the sand until they could barely fight the urge to come anymore. For the first time it was Lizzie that hissed her warning, "Oh my God, Scooter." "Me too," he grunted. That night for the very first time, his sister came first. He managed it somehow. He fought off the perfection of her body long enough to satisfy the beautiful girl in front of him. But he wasn't far behind. Halfway through her gigantic peak, she felt him start spurting his hot cum inside her. The timing couldn't have been better. It nudged her climax higher, pushed it deeper inside her, made everything better. She had to bite her own lip to keep from screaming out the joy she wanted to. Their mother wasn't far away enough for her to risk yelling out at the top of her lungs. They stayed still for a few moments until Richard eased himself out of her. He watched as she let herself fall flat onto her stomach on the sand. He stretched out on top of her to keep her warm against the cool evening air. His erection never softened. She fidgeted slightly until it was trapped between her ass cheeks and she gave it a few tender squeezes with her taut buns. She didn't know how to say what she needed to. Not out loud anyway. And her brother was behind her so she couldn't write it on his skin. So with a shaky hand she reached out and wrote it out on the sand. There is no chip. It took a moment for him to realize she'd written something. When he read it he went from confused to angry. Jesus Christ, Lizzie. What the fuck is the matter with you? I know. She started crying under him. Shhh. Please don't wake Mom up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lied to both of you. Especially to you. I just got all wrapped up in wanting you. It was the chase, Richard. Watching and wanting you. Chasing me? Is that what this is all about? He was hurt now too. He was just another thing for her to win. Another trophy. No, not just, look, I'm sorry. So incredibly, deeply sorry. You don't deserve to be treated like I treated you. I don't know if I can ever make this up to you. She tentatively pressed her ass back against him to test and see if he was still hard in the crease there. The steely shaft she felt gave her some small hope. Scooter, for the rest of our lives I will let you fuck me wherever, whenever, and however you want. I'm yours. To use as you please. Your little fuck toy. Call me anytime, day or night, and I'll come to you. Or just show up on my door. Anything you ask. She started hunching up against him and he pressed down into her, humping into her ASSC rack. I'm serious, Scooter. My body will be my apology, she murmured as she felt him steer his tip to her tiny back door. She arched her ass up willingly. Do you want my ass now? Yes, he said through clenched teeth. He pressed firmly and she held still as the stretching and the straining started. It was wrong and nasty and wonderful. Just the way she'd hoped. You can bring another girl with you if you want, Scooter. I'll let her watch while you fuck me in the ass. She'll never have to take you that way. I'll do it for her. You'll never have to sodomize another woman again. He sank steadily into the impossibly tight ass his sister willingly offered. Her tiny rectum pulsed, greedily swallowing his shaft and his rage at the same time. He held himself still to let her relax. In the quiet, he could feel her little heart racing, hear her small quick breaths. Shhh, he finally said softly, no other girls, Lizzie. Oh God, this is good, she grunted with her face pressed sideways into the beach as he pulled out of her ass and pressed back in carefully. He started to ream her barely used back door. The firm sand beneath them didn't give way at all as he drilled down into her. It meant her brother was reaching deeper than he'd ever been. I want your dick in my ass like this every day. I want you behind me, spreading my tiny cheeks and pressing inside me. I want to feel this full, this stuffed, with cock. Your cock. Fuck me, Scooter. Fuck my ass until I can't walk tomorrow. I'll curl up on the couch and remember this all day. We'll get rid of Mom again for a few hours and you can fuck it more. Your cum will make it feel better. Then I'll suck you hard and you can do my ass again. We'll keep doing it until I can't get you hard anymore. Her voice was husky now. Please? Please tell me you like this too? Tell me you like fucking your little sister's tiny asshole as much as it likes being stuffed by your wonderful cock. I'm sorry I lied. His sister's insanely perverted talk, the tight, gripping heat of her rectum, the sleek adolescent body she submitted for his pleasure without reservation or complaint, it was too much. He erupted, growling from his chest in a bestial way that he'd never experienced before. His orgasm came from somewhere deep, primal, and basic. As his body unloaded into the little blonde teen beneath him that he'd known his entire life, it brought an incredible sense of satisfaction. Lizzie was his now. In every way. He collapsed, dazed, on top of her. As his head slowly cleared, he realized that she was masturbating beneath him, excited again by the near-merciless screwing he'd inflicted on her inexperienced hole. He nipped gently at the back of her neck and started sawing his still mostly hard shaft in and out of her tender cum-slicked ass. "Come for me again, Lizzie? You can do it, honey," he coaxed. "May," she moaned weakly into the sand and jilled herself more quickly. "I want to feel you come with my cock in your ass for the first time. Brothers come first, right, Lizzie? Let me be the first one to feel it. The very first time your body admits how much it loves to be taken this way. Let me feel the squeezing, the clutching, the wrenching of your tiny ass on me. Do it, sis. Do it for me. Come." While he urged her on, Richard drew a knee up beneath him and leaned onto it. It made just enough room for his hand to slide beneath him. His sister was already panting raggedly as her orgasm hurtled towards her. His fingers found her vacant pussy that was dripping onto the sand. He slid his fingers up and down her lips, then pressed two to her entrance, tighter now because her ass was straining around his shaft. She gasped and arched her hips up eagerly though, craving the new touch. She mewled softly and her hand worked at her clit while his fingers gingerly sank inside her. She shuddered. It felt so much tighter with him buried in her ass. He worked his fingers in and out softly in time with his cock and Lizzie shuddered under him. It was like nothing Lizzie had ever dreamed of, much less felt. Her brother's cock crammed inside her back there. Now his fingers up front too. Her little hand was flying back and forth across her clit. Even the way her body was pressed down into the cool sand. Its roughness made everything feel real. She wasn't dreaming this. The orgasm she'd first felt building when her brother was savaging her backdoor now swelled beyond rational proportion. What looked wonderful before now looked terrifying. Even brave little Lizzie knew that some waves are too big to ride. "Scooter," she said weakly. She needed him to stop for just a minute. Let her catch her breath. Reset and try again when she was calmer. But the complicated words she needed wouldn't come. "Richie." She managed dizzily. She couldn't think. There wasn't enough time now anyway. Not enough energy either. The undertow of the orgasm was sucking at her insides, dragging her down. Her vision narrowed to two tunnels. For a morbid moment she figured, "Meh, what the hell?" It was a good way to die, getting fucked senseless by the man she'd loved longer than she could remember. "Brother," she whispered softly with the last of her air. The tidal wave orgasm crashed down on her and everything went black. She rolled and tumbled in the darkness, surrendering to the overwhelming pleasure, easily the most intense orgasm of her life. "Le petit mort my ass," she thought as her body heaved with dark joy. This was full-sized mort. She was a little surprised when she woke up, but by then her brother had already rolled her onto her back and was tenderly brushing sand off her chest and belly. He was looking at her with worry. "I'm okay," she croaked. "What?" He leaned closer. She kissed his cheek, and smiled weakly as she swallowed a few times. Her tongue was thick and awkward in her mouth. She'd been panting too hard and for too long. "Sorry, I was trying to say, I'm okay." "Glad to hear it." He brushed more sand off her cheek gingerly. "Still mad?" She half smiled. "A little, but we're okay. It would help if we did this again tomorrow night after Mom goes to sleep." "It's a deal," she smiled. Then her smile flattened into a serious line. "Scooter, tomorrow's going to be crazy. I'm going to have to win an Emmy to pull this off with Mom. Chip is going to call and break off our engagement." He smirked. "I'll find somewhere else to be for the afternoon." "Good idea. Anything else I should know, sis? While you're spilling your guts, I mean." She looked up at him and smiled. "The time for secrets, all secrets was over. Yet, one last thing. She rolled onto her stomach again. Honestly, I can't believe you haven't figured this out. I'm not sure why people think you're the smart one. As she teased him, she wrote an imu in the sand. Then another. And another. But the word changed slightly each time just at the middle letter. Its outside legs grew a little longer with each new version. The legs curved inwards and joined at a point underneath. The middle leg shortened slightly. The middle letter wasn't a letter at all. It never was. He'd guessed wrong years ago and never looked back. It was a heart. She nodded at the sand, and looked at him with eyes gone large and soft and honest. See, Scooter? I heart you. I didn't mean it as a puzzle. I was just telling you how I felt. Since we were children. I've known since I wrote this that very first time. Don't you see? I'm in love with you, Scooter. Always have been. He was frozen, staring at the sand. In the long silence that stretched out, she looked from him to sand and back again. Okay, here's your fair warning, Richie. I'm going to start some serious crying if you don't say something soon. When he finally moved, it was to stroke her hair and kiss her. You win, Lizzie. You win. I love you too. He rolled onto his back to face the night sky as she watched. Okay, now go ahead, sis. Do it. We both know you want to. She looked at him, puzzled, then burst out laughing. Oh, that. Maybe he wasn't that dumb after all. He was right, there was something she wanted to do. She grinned from ear to ear as she rolled onto her side and snuggled into him. She draped a sandy arm and leg across his body and pressed herself close. With her head resting on her big brother's chest, Lizzie took the longest, sweetest breath she'd ever taken. She let the night air fill her lungs, savoring the smell of her new lover and the sea. She let her heart fill too, thinking back over their lives together. So long. So long. So much waiting. When her heart and lungs were near bursting, she set their contents free. Lizzie Robbins howled the longest, softest, most heartfelt baa she'd ever howled into her brother's shoulder. It was the sound of a long, hard chase now won. Of a young woman's joy and love and lust. Of trust and gratitude and devotion given and returned. There had never been, and would never be, another baa like it in Lizzie's life. This one was special. It was only loud enough for both of them to hear. Author's postscript, so at some point, I got the idea into my head that seducing a sibling might be kind of like a long and very dangerous chase. There would have to be an absurd amount of patience involved, wouldn't there? If you didn't wait for just the right moment, or create that moment very carefully, things would probably get messy. If you're the commenting sort of reader, I'd love to hear if you figured out what imu was before the end. I snookered all but one of my friends with that one. It was only the girl that caught it. You may also find it interesting to know that she explained it to her slightly slower boyfriend by writing it over and over on a piece of paper to show how an M might be mistaken for a heart. I promptly hijacked her imagery and incorporated it into my story. The original version just had Lizzie writing it out correctly for her brother once. Thanks, CJ. And yes, smart girls do rock. In fact, they do so epically. Happy. If you want to throw me some feedback, and I do love feedback, please do it publicly. My private feedback doesn't work for some reason. Thanks for getting onto this particular ride, folks. Cheers. Paco Fear. Warm little histories and forgotten games. Long hidden passions and funny nicknames. There's something so naughty tween loving siblings. But these are a few of my favorite things.